Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. As mentioned, our guest on the program, Jonathan Paull. He's a director at York County Physiotherapy and Sports Injuries Clinic in Newmarket, Ontario. Working for the clinic for more than 15 years, Jonathan has also served as its clinic fitness trainer, medical exercise specialist. Paull is also the inventor of the innovative Cat Post 2000. That's a complete stretching, strengthening, and assistive exercise station. He's co-authored Core Exercises and Training Manual with the clinic's senior physiotherapist and is now author of his first book, Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body. And he's with us on This Week in America. Jonathan, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Rick.
This book is so important, and the first thing you say, and this is a warning to everybody of middle age who suddenly decides, I really need to get back in shape. You say too many times middle-aged people say, I need to get in better shape, and bang, the first thing you know, they're out the door without really giving a whole lot of thought to footwear, to clothing, to warming up. Is that the biggest problem middle-agers face, is they get into a program, which is generally good, except they do it too quickly?
Well, I think that's definitely one of the biggest problems. I mean, the biggest problem, obviously, from the clinic side is that a lot of injuries that we see from people trying to be active, is preventable.
Yes.
So unfortunately, what happens is they come to the clinic when they've injured themselves. We train, we coach them, we educate them, and we rehabilitate them to get back to what they, primarily wanted to do in the first place. But they had to injure themselves first. So really the whole book and what I'm trying to do is to get ourselves to the front of the line of injury prevention.
The book is called Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body. It's available bookstores all across the country, of course, at Amazon. Jonathan's website is Jonathan Paull, and that's Paull, 2 L's.com. And, of course, you can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on to that. Do you sometimes find when people come in and they say, Jonathan, I hurt myself, I wanted to do something, and obviously I did it wrong. Do sometimes we do more harm than good when we try to get started without some supervision?
Well, I think that is the big problem, is that a lot of times we are fit enough to get us through our daily living.
Right.
It's when we all of a sudden put new demands on the body that all of a sudden we're not aware of muscle instability or any weaknesses that may exist until we've actually forced ourselves. And then all of a sudden we wake up the next day and we're in pain. So really, it's very important, just like taking your car in or other things, you need to go in for like a pre-fitness evaluation.
Our guest on This Week in America is Jonathan Paull. He's the author of the book Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body. And this basically came out of, 15, 16 years of your work. We talked about it, York County Physiotherapy and Sports Injuries Clinic. And you've come up with this great concept. And the book is not really, it's not a quick fix. It's going to give you a lot of ideas which you can implement. And basically you're saying, you use the analogy, a custom-built home. And it makes a whole lot of sense. Talk about that, because it's where we all should be as we start this process.
Well, I mean, one reason that I went with the home is obviously because it's something that people can identify with.
Yes.
And if you can come up with a comparable that people can relate to, then it just makes it that much easier when you're teaching and you're training and you're trying to explain the importance of it. So it's people are pretty much the same way. They'll see this custom built home and they'll say, boy, this is beautiful. I wish I could live there. And with the fitness component, people will look at magazines or on the internet and they'll see these extremely fit people and they'll say to themselves, I want to look like that. But what they have to realize, just like building a new home, there's a whole process to get that final product. And if you skip something or you overlook it or you don't build it properly, you all of a sudden could have a structure that can fall apart just like your body can.
Do you find that people in their maybe 20s, early 30s, before life gets really hectic, they're in sort of their own little exercise routine, they get away from it, suddenly they're middle-aged, they decide to do it again, and they think they're going to pick up where they left off. Is that a problem that we don't realize age has taken its toll on our body?
Well, unfortunately for the middle-aged people, I mean, if they were to look back when they're, especially like in high school and like you said, in their early 20s, a lot of the exercises that we used to do are pretty much blacklisted. So if all of a sudden you're in your 40s and 50s and you decide that you want to get active and you're thinking, I'll just do what I used to do, you're already starting off on the wrong foot, leading yourself to probably more harm than good.
You talk a lot in the book, and the book is Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body, about An emphasis on core stability, flexibility, and strengthening the stabilizer muscles. Let's talk about core stability. Exactly what are we talking about? We hear that thrown around a lot, that you really need to strengthen the core. Exactly what's meant by that?
Well, yes, and you're exactly right. The core is one of those now sort of inwards, and you have to be careful because a lot of times the fitness industry will take exercises and they will say that it's core work, where
Right.
in a sense, if you applied it to the rehabilitation field, it's not. So the key thing about core muscles is that they're stabilizer muscles. So they're there to protect the spine and the neck. And same again, when I use comparables, I think of the tent pole with the four strings that go off and attach to the ground. And if it's nice and tight on a windy day, the tent won't move at all. But if one of those ropes are laxed, then that thing will just shake like crazy, and eventually the tent falls down. So your stabilizer muscles or your core muscles, sorry, are like the foundation of a house. So really everything's built on top of this. So the stronger the core, the stronger the structure above it can be.
Interesting. And in talking about flexibility, and I do hear that mentioned quite a bit. And sometimes people think, what's flexibility have to do with my overall, health? I want to look good. Where does flexibility enter into this? It really is an important factor, isn't it?
Well, it is, because especially as we get older, we
Yes.
get stronger and we lose the flexibility. I mean, just look at children. You can bend them in half and they're great. And we have a tough time just doing the basic movements. But the key thing is that with flexibility, if you lose it, all of a sudden it starts changing the patterns on how you do things. And when you have that loss of flexibility, you start to compensate for that lack of movement or full range of motion. And a lot of times that lack of flexibility is making you do things that are actually doing more harm than good. So for example, if you have poor flexibility in your lower extremities and you have to crouch down to pick up a box, you probably can't get all the way down there. So now you've got to bend at the back and you start lifting, and that's where a lot of the back problems come from. So it improves performance and it improves how you do things. And then obviously flexible muscles are a lower risk of injury as well.
You're listening to This Week in America. Our website is thisweekinamerica.us. Our guest on the program, medical exercise specialist Jonathan Paull. He's authored the book Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body. His website is jonathanpaul with 2Ls.com. Book available at Amazon, other bookstores around the country, and you can link on directly to Jonathan's website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And I mentioned stabilizer muscles. Again, what exactly are those?
Okay, so the stabilizer muscles are ones that you'll find originate in the shoulder, like your rotator cuff, in the hip area, and core muscles are stabilizer muscles as well. So you've got sort of your primary muscles and your stabilizers. Your primary muscles are like your power muscles. So those are the ones that are doing the heavy work, whereas the stabilizers make sure that the skeletal system stays intact and doesn't start shifting and shearing. So they're endurance. So if you're doing an activity, say for example, you're going for a run or you're on elliptical for 10, 15, 20 minutes, if the stabilizers start to fatigue, then all of a sudden you start shifting and shearing your skeletal system, which then could lead to, shoulder impingement
Right.
and to a whole pile of other problems.
A fascinating book, Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body. It's interesting because you talk about the fuse principle. Exactly what is that?
The fuse principle is the training of the mind as well. And that's another aspect, and especially for people who fail and start in a program and actually maintaining it. You have to train your mind to be a supporter and not negative. So for example, if you decide, you know what, I want to lose some weight, I'm going to start this activity, you've got to make sure that you're taking activities that your mind is okay with and is going to be a willing participant, because as soon as it can find an excuse not to do it, it will.
Jonathan Paull, our guest on the program, Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body is the name of his new book. Again, available on Amazon all across country bookstores and available at his website, jonathanpaul with 2Ls.com. It's a systematic guide to how to reach fitness goals and do it injury-free. And reaching those goals, once someone middle-aged decides, okay, I'm going to do that. Seems like they do one of two things. They'll go buy a treadmill, not knowing exactly what it is they're buying, but they will buy a treadmill, or they will join a gym. What's the best way for someone to get started? A realistic way for them to get started where they'll see some results?
Well, realistically, you got to make sure that you pick a program that you want to do. It's amazing how many times I have a patient that comes up to me and say that they want to lose some weight or they want to tone up, and they'll say, "Well, I'm starting this activity because I've been told that you can lose quite a bit of weight doing this." And you ask them, "Is this something that you enjoy doing, or have you done it before in the past?" And they'll say, "No, I was just told that this is what I should be doing." So really, for a program to be successful right from the very beginning, you got to have to make sure that it correlates with your personality. So if you like to be in groups, make sure that you're in a group setting, not just in an individual type program. If you like to work out at home and you have the discipline, that's great. But for a lot of people, they don't. So they should be thinking about going to an environment where there's some ownership. So you have to make sure that you pick a program that suits who you are and what your personality type is.
Jonathan Paull, our guest in the program, you say in the book the largest patient pool that you work with is middle-aged people, and you realize that there's really a need for sort of a guide for these people. What are some of the injuries that you see from middle-aged people that come to you?
Well, definitely the back is probably number one. And that's not just from the activities that they've taken, but it's also just because of daily living. So for example, I'll have people who are all of a sudden coming to see me, and maybe they've had back history in the past, but you find out that they sit at the desk all day. They drive 3 hours to get to work and to get back. So they're doing all these activities that are already getting in that flexed position. Now they all of a sudden go to a gym and they're doing stuff that's just adding on to that. So all of a sudden, things are just getting worse and worse and worse, and not really for the better.
Jonathan Paull, our guest, author of the book Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body. How important are realistic expectations? We've talked before, earlier in the program, about people come in and suddenly, okay, I've made the decision to do something. I'd like to go back where I was 20 years ago, and it's not realistic to get there overnight. Is that a big stumbling block that we want, and we're in an era where we want to see quick results?
Well, in the perfect world, yes. And unfortunately, when it comes to fitness, health, overall, it has to be something it's a lifestyle. It shouldn't be just where you pick up a magazine and it says, "Oh, look at that! I can lose 25 pounds in 1 week." Because you know what? I don't know. Maybe magically you can, but you're never going to keep it off. It's a life change, and I'm a big advocate of the step-by-step process, because it has to be small change and they have to be realistic. Because if you take something too big and you've given it a real short timeline, you're going to fail. And that's just going to discourage you. And for a lot of people, they started off with the right reasons and then they just say, "Forget it, I'm not doing it." So if you take a step-by-step process, they're more attainable. And it also allows you to look back and say, "Oh, geez, look at that. I can actually do it. I have made some progress." And as soon as your mind has sees progress, then you know what? Everything just jumps on board and you're heading in the right direction.
Jonathan Paull, our guest on This Week in America. Jonathan is a medical exercise specialist, author of the book Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body. You look in really good shape. You're probably not quite in that middle-aged category yet, but getting close to that. Well, what do you do? How do you stay in shape? What works for you?
Well, funny that you mentioned that, because in the 2015, I'm actually turning 50. And to sort of emphasize that, I was just mentioning earlier that I'm actually trying out for the Ballantrae Fire Department, and I'm competing with people that are mid 20s, early 30s. So I've always been active. It's always been part of my lifestyle. And that's what I always try to encourage people. It's got to be something just like going to work, taking out the garbage. It's got to be, a daily routine. But even myself, if I look at the programs that I did in my, in high school and university, early 20s and in the 30s, I look back and it has changed. I was able to adapt to who I am now. And I think that's really the big thing that middle-aged people have to do. They have to be realistic and say, "Listen, I was very active when I was younger. I'm older now. It doesn't mean I can't be, active and healthy and look good, but you have to change your approach and you have to accept reality, and you can still achieve all your goals."
Tell me about when people come to you and maybe they're injured and they end up coming to you, or they're coming to you and maybe have read the book and wanted to get some advice, and suddenly they're realizing, wow, this really works. I'm feeling a lot better. People are saying, "If you lost a little weight, you're looking a little younger, you're moving a little quicker." Tell me about that transformation that people go through when they've done this successfully and they're on the right track.
Well, the best ones for me are the most successful ones. Is sometimes when we have patients that come through and I work with them, and their main goal wasn't actually to start a fitness activity. Maybe it was just to work on like I said, a rotator cuff trouble. They come in and they're doing some exercises along with their rehab, and then all of a sudden, just like you said, they say, you know what, I feel a little bit better. Maybe I should try a little bit more. And then they'll ask for advice instead of searching because they've been already set on a positive path. And then as you're incorporating these sort of little simple exercises, they start to slowly see the benefits of it. And then all of a sudden, these people who did absolutely nothing are all of a sudden getting out more, maybe joining an activity, and you'll see them maybe a year, 2 years later, maybe when you're out at the mall, and they come up to you and then they tell you their personal story. And that's very rewarding.
When did you decide I'm going to put this book together? And again, the book is not a quick fix. It's just a very logical way to assess where you are, how to get where you want to be. When did you decide, and I mentioned you were co-author of a book before, when did you decide I'm going to do this? There's value in this. I can help people.
Well, it was because my profession, it was a broken record. I couldn't believe I was just saying the same stuff, showing the same stuff over and over and over again. And you know what? And maybe that's a part of the problem with the the health is that we tend to just sit at the end of the line and we wait for you to come and see us.
Yes.
And I think one day I realized, wait a sec, we're here to try to help people get better and not come back. Why are we waiting at the end? Let's get to the front and and save them an expensive and and not a very pleasant experience, and educate them there instead of at the end.
The book is called Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body. Our guest on This Week in America is Jonathan Paull. His website is Jonathan Paull, and that's Paull with 2Ls.com. Book available at Amazon all across the country. Information available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Jonathan, thank you for joining us on the program. We're going to have you back and go into more detail what's in the book. You've done an excellent job. Again, the book is Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body. And whatever you're doing as you approach age 50, I think we all need to follow that. So I'm glad you wrote the book and give us sort of a map to get to where you are.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to spread the word.
It's a pleasure to have you in the program. Once again, the book is called Structurally Sound, Renovating the Middle-Aged Body, available at Jonathan's website, jonathanpaull.com. You're listening to This Week in America, our website, thisweekinamerica.us.